There are moments in life when the sting of rejection feels unbearable. A door slams shut, an opportunity is denied, a relationship dissolves, or a dream evaporates before our very eyes. In those moments, we wrestle with the question, why not me? Why this denial? The human heart aches to be accepted, recognized, and affirmed. And when that doesn't happen, when rejection pierces us like an arrow, our natural instinct is either to fight against it or to crumble beneath it. Yet, hidden in the shadows of rejection is a strange and often overlooked gift. Rejection, when seen through the lens of faith, is not a curse, but a compass. It points us away from paths that were never meant for us and directs us toward the destiny written long before we ever drew breath. To accept rejection is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is an act of trust in the author of our story, who knows the chapters we have not yet read. Tonight, let us explore why acceptance of rejection is not surrender, but strength, not defeat, but direction. For in every rejection lies the fingerprints of a greater plan waiting to unfold. Rejection, in its raw form, often feels like an abrupt conclusion, a letter that says no, a voice that refuses us, an opportunity withheld. It appears final, like the closing of a book. Yet in truth, rejection is seldom an end. More often, it is a pivot, a redirection that points us to a path we might never have considered on our own. When a door shuts in our face, it is easy to think that the story has ended. But what if that door was never meant to open for us? What if it was merely standing in the way of something far greater, something that requires us to take another path? History and experience teach us that some of the most remarkable journeys began with what looked like failure. Joseph was rejected by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and cast into prison. By every human standard, his story should have ended in despair. Yet those very rejections redirected his steps toward Egypt, where he would rise to become the second most powerful man in the nation and save countless lives. His rejection was not the end of his story. It was the turning point that brought him into alignment with divine purpose. In our own lives, rejection acts the same way. That job we did not get. That relationship that did not last, that dream that seemed to crumble. All of these are moments where we are tempted to mourn what is lost rather than see what is coming. The pain is real, and we should not dismiss it, but neither should we be deceived by it. Rejection is not a signal that we are worthless or forgotten. It is often the signpost pointing us to something different, something better suited to who we are becoming. The challenge is that we rarely see the redirection in the moment. To us, rejection feels like silence, like failure, like the crushing of hope. But faith teaches us to step back and look beyond what our limited sight can perceive. Faith whispers that the detour is not an accident, that the no was never meant to harm us, but to guide us. Rejection often removes us from situations that would have diminished us or from alliances that would have weakened us. It creates space for us to grow, to realign, and to discover opportunities we might never have pursued otherwise. When we begin to see rejection as redirection, we can face it with courage instead of despair. We stop asking, "Why was I denied?" and begin asking, "Where am I being led?" That shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of ending our story, rejection becomes the turning of a page. Instead of cutting us off, it pushes us forward. And though we may not see it immediately, we will one day look back and realize that every rejection carried us closer to the very place we were meant to be all along. When rejection comes, it is easy to blame people, circumstances, or even ourselves. We imagine that if only we had spoken differently, tried harder, or positioned ourselves better, the outcome would have changed. Yet the reality is that there is a hand greater than ours at work behind the doors that close in our lives. God, in His sovereignty, sees what we cannot see, knows what we cannot know, and acts to protect, direct, and prepare us for what lies ahead. A closed door is never random. It is an intentional act of divine guidance, even when it feels painful in the moment. Think of the Apostle Paul on his missionary journeys. His desire was to preach the gospel everywhere, yet in Acts we read how the Spirit of God prevented him from entering certain regions. To Paul, it might have seemed like rejection, an obstacle to his mission. But in truth, it was God orchestrating a greater plan, redirecting him to Macedonia, where doors of opportunity would swing wide open. What Paul first encountered as a denial was, in fact, an invitation to step into something far greater. God's sovereignty was at work, using closed doors to position him for maximum impact. This truth applies to our own lives. When a relationship does not work out, When a job offer never materializes, or when a dream collapses, our immediate reaction is grief and frustration. Yet in the unseen realm, God is often intervening on our behalf. He knows the dangers ahead that we cannot anticipate. He knows the traps that would ensnare us, the alliances that would derail us, and the opportunities that might appear attractive but would eventually destroy us. In His mercy, He closes doors, not to harm us, but to preserve us. It requires faith to accept that the denial of something we desperately wanted could actually be a blessing. Faith trusts that God does not make mistakes, that His timing is perfect, and that His wisdom far exceeds our understanding. When He says no, it is because there is a better yes waiting ahead. The rejection we mourn today may be the very protection we will thank Him for tomorrow. What we see as an interruption is often His orchestration. The sovereignty of God transforms our perspective on rejection. Instead of feeling abandoned, we begin to recognize that we are being shepherded. Instead of questioning His goodness, we lean into His plan with confidence. Closed doors no longer define us as failures, but remind us that we are loved by a Father who knows exactly where we need to go. If He closes a door, it is only because He has prepared another path that leads to a destiny greater than we could have chosen for ourselves. So, the next time rejection confronts you, pause and consider, could this be God's hand at work? Could this closed door be His way of steering you away from harm and toward blessing? If so, then rejection ceases to be something to fear. It becomes a mark of divine sovereignty guiding your every step. Rejection does more than simply redirect us. It refines us. Disappointment has a way of stripping away illusions, testing our motives, and revealing what truly resides in our hearts. Left unchecked, we can become too dependent on human approval, too tied to our own ambitions, or too focused on temporary success. But when rejection interrupts our plans, it presses us into a deeper place of reflection. It forces us to ask, why do I want this? Who am I trying to please? Where does my confidence really rest? In that refining fire, something stronger, purer, and more resilient emerges. Consider how gold is purified. It must pass through intense heat so that impurities rise to the surface and can be removed. In the same way, disappointment acts as the fire that reveals what is hidden within us. The pain of being denied uncovers insecurities we may not have faced, pride we may not have acknowledged, or misplaced desires we may not have recognized. Though the process is uncomfortable, it is necessary because only through refinement can we become vessels ready for greater purpose. Throughout Scripture, this theme repeats itself. David was anointed as king, yet he spent years in the wilderness pursued by Saul, living as an outcast. His rejection from the palace was not punishment, it was preparation. In those lonely caves and desperate nights, his character was forged, his dependence on God deepened, and his heart was refined to shepherd a nation. Without the fire of rejection and disappointment, David would never have become the man after God's own heart. The same is true for us. Rejection has a way of humbling us, grounding us, and teaching us patience. It breaks down our reliance on quick results and instant gratification. It teaches us that character matters more than recognition, and faithfulness is more valuable than applause. Each time we are told no, we have the opportunity to grow in resilience, to strengthen our faith, and to realign our priorities. But refinement through disappointment also brings clarity. Many times we chase after things that glitter but do not last. We may pursue opportunities for the wrong reasons, pride, envy, or insecurity. When rejection strips those pursuits away, we gain the chance to see what truly matters. It clears the fog of self-centered ambition and reveals the deeper calling God has placed within us. What felt like loss becomes a pruning process, cutting away what hinders so that something greater may flourish. If we embrace rejection as refinement rather than ruin, we learn to welcome the lessons hidden in disappointment. We learn to let go of bitterness and receive wisdom. We learn to stop measuring our value by external achievements and anchor ourselves in eternal truths. The very rejection that once wounded us becomes the chisel that shapes us into instruments ready for higher purposes. In the end, rejection does not merely change our direction, it changes us. And that transformation is the true treasure found in disappointment. One of the most damaging effects of rejection is the subtle lie it whispers into our hearts. You are not enough. When a door closes, when an application is denied, or when a relationship falls apart, it is easy to confuse the outcome with our identity. We begin to think that the rejection defines us, that our worth is measured by how others respond to us, or that our value is tied to the success of our efforts. Yet this is a dangerous deception because our true identity is not found in outcomes or opinions. It is anchored in something far deeper, something unshakable. Every person who has ever walked in faith has faced rejection, yet none of them were diminished in their worth because of it. Joseph was despised by his brothers, but he was still chosen by God. Moses was rejected by his people when he tried to defend them, but he was still the one called to lead them out of Egypt. David was overlooked by his own father when Samuel came to anoint a king, but that did not change the fact that God had already set his eyes on him, and Christ himself, the cornerstone, was rejected by men, yet exalted above every name. The rejection of people never changed their divine identity. The problem arises when we allow the opinions of others or the success of our endeavors to become the mirror by which we measure ourselves. If the crowd cheers, we feel valuable. If they turn away, we feel worthless. But identity rooted in outcomes will always be fragile because outcomes shift and opinions change. True identity must rest in the unchanging truth of who we are in God's sight. He does not measure us by achievements, applause, or acceptance. He measures us by faithfulness, obedience, and the heart. Separating identity from outcome frees us from the tyranny of rejection. It allows us to see a closed door not as a condemnation of our worth, but as a redirection of our steps. It teaches us that failing at something does not make us failures, and being denied by others does not make us insignificant. We are not defined by the no's we receive, but by the yes God has spoken over our lives. This shift in perspective empowers us to endure rejection with grace. We no longer crumble under disappointment because we know who we are regardless of what happens. We no longer strive desperately for approval because we rest in the knowledge that we are already accepted by the one whose opinion matters most. With identity secure, rejection loses its power to wound us at the core. In the end, rejection becomes less about us and more about the path we are meant to walk. It is not a verdict on our worth, but an adjustment in our direction. And when we learn to separate our identity from outcomes, we walk with a confidence that no rejection can take away. When we encounter rejection, our first instinct is to resist it. We replay conversations in our minds, imagine how we could have changed the outcome, or harbor bitterness toward those who turned us away. Yet true strength is found not in clinging to what is gone, but in learning to release it. Acceptance is not passive resignation, it is an act of faith. To accept rejection is to declare that God's plan is greater than our disappointment, that His wisdom surpasses our understanding, and that His timing is perfect even when it clashes with our desires. Acceptance requires humility because it acknowledges that we do not see the full picture. We only perceive the present moment, the closed door before us, while God sees the entire landscape of our lives. By accepting rejection, we trust that He has shielded us from something that would have harmed us, or that He is preparing us for something better suited to our purpose. Acceptance shifts our focus from what we lost to what God may yet reveal. It is faith in action, faith that God's silence is not absence, His denial is not cruelty, and His delays are not neglect. Consider Christ in Gethsemane, praying, "Not my will, but yours be done." In that moment, He accepted what lay ahead, the rejection of men, the agony of the cross, because He trusted the Father's plan. Acceptance did not mean the pain disappeared, but it meant His heart was aligned with God's will. Through that act of faith, salvation was made possible. Acceptance then is not weakness, it is alignment with divine purpose, even when that purpose is veiled in mystery. For us, acceptance often means releasing our grip on dreams we cherished. It may mean letting go of a career we thought would define us, a relationship we hoped would last, or an opportunity we believed was essential. Acceptance does not deny the pain of loss, but it chooses to believe that God remains sovereign in spite of it. Instead of clinging to what might have been, we open our hands to what is yet to come. That posture of surrender is one of the purest demonstrations of faith. The fruit of acceptance is peace. While resistance breeds bitterness, acceptance calms the soul. It silences the endless what-ifs and quiets the torment of regret. When we accept rejection as part of God's design, we free ourselves from the burden of proving our worth or demanding answers. We rest in the assurance that His plans are good, even when they are hidden. In this way, acceptance becomes a testimony of trust. Others see how we handle disappointment, and our peace in the face of rejection becomes a witness of God's faithfulness. Acceptance transforms rejection from a stumbling block into a stepping stone, not because we forced the outcome, but because we entrusted it to the one who knows the end from the beginning. To accept rejection, then, is not to give up. It is to give over, placing our future into the hands of God with unwavering faith. Rejection by itself can feel like a wound that refuses to heal. It stings, lingers, and tempts us to withdraw into silence or bitterness. But when seen through the eyes of faith, rejection does not end with pain. It becomes the raw material of testimony. What once broke us can later be the very thing that encourages someone else to rise. The scars we carry become stories that reveal God's wisdom, His timing, and His faithfulness in ways success alone never could. Every no we face has the potential to shape us into storytellers of grace. When we share how rejection redirected us, how it refined our character, and how it led us to something greater, we transform what was once a personal struggle into a communal blessing. Others who face the sting of rejection see in our journey a roadmap for hope. Our testimony becomes living proof that rejection is not the final word, but a stepping stone to something deeper and more enduring. Think of Joseph standing before his brothers years after they betrayed him. What they meant for evil, God turned for good. His rejection was not erased, but it was reframed. It became the testimony that God's hand had guided every twist and turn. Think of Paul, who was beaten, shipwrecked, and often unwelcome in the very places he longed to minister. His hardships became the foundation for letters that still strengthen believers today. Even Christ's rejection, as agonizing as it was, became the central testimony of God's redeeming love. Our own lives carry the same potential. That job you didn't get, the friendship that fell apart, the door that closed, all of these moments can either remain as bitter memories or be redeemed as testimonies. The choice lies in whether we hold on to resentment or allow God to weave the rejection into a story that uplifts others. When we testify, we proclaim not just our pain, but also God's power to use it for good. Turning rejection into testimony also keeps us from being trapped in self-pity. It shifts our focus outward. Instead of obsessing over why we were denied, we begin to see how our story might serve someone else. That young person who feels overlooked can draw strength from hearing how you survived being overlooked yourself. That friend who feels unworthy can be encouraged by your story of finding worth beyond human approval. What once was your rejection becomes their reminder that God is still working. Testimonies born out of rejection glorify God in ways triumphs never could. Success may impress, but stories of endurance, trust, and redemption inspire. When others hear how God carried us through rejection, they are reminded that He will carry them as well. Our rejection then ceases to be a mark of shame and becomes a badge of grace, a story that points beyond us to the one who transforms every no into a greater yes. In this way, rejection not only shapes us but blesses countless others through the testimony it leaves behind.